In 1995, a 5-year-old boy in India suddenly told his parents that he remembered everything about his past life, his home, his family, even how he died. At first, his parents brushed it off as a child's imagination, but his memories were too detailed, too vivid, too specific to be random. He recalled exact street names, the layout of his previous house, and even the names of the family members he claimed to have once belonged to. Curious and slightly unsettled, his parents decided to investigate. They traveled to the village their son kept describing, a place hundreds of miles away, where they had never been before. To their shock, every detail the boy had mentioned matched perfectly with the life of a man who had passed away years earlier. The family of the deceased confirmed that their relative had died in the exact way the boy had described. He even recognized people he had never met in this lifetime, but seemed to know from his past. This is not an isolated case. Across the world, from the United States to Thailand, from England to the Middle East, thousands of similar stories have been documented. Some of these children recall intricate details of their past lives, even speaking in languages they had never learned. If reincarnation is real, does it mean that we consciously choose our lives before being born? Could our struggles, our relationships, and even our destiny be part of a larger plan, one we agreed to before stepping into this world? In the next few minutes, you might find the beginning of this video a bit challenging, as I'll be diving into serious scientific research on reincarnation and past life memories. But don't worry, the later parts will be absolutely fascinating. Mysterious stories, thrilling experiences of past lives, and astonishing accounts of reincarnation will bring you answers you never expected. Beyond that, I've spent a great deal of time studying practical methods that can help accelerate the soul's evolution. And the best part? I've condensed the most effective techniques into a simple, easy-to-understand guide that you can apply to your daily life, waiting for you right at the end of this video. Now let's begin. Is reincarnation random, or is it planned? This question has fascinated human minds for millennia. If the universe operates according to certain laws, wouldn't the soul follow a similar order? In spiritual traditions ranging from Hinduism and Buddhism to Kabbalah and Hermeticism, reincarnation isn't a game of chance. It's shaped by the law of karma. What we sow in one life determines the path of the next. Think of it this way: if someone lives selfishly, harming others, do they truly escape the consequences just because they die? According to the concept of karma, they will inevitably experience similar pain in another life to fully understand the impact of their actions. On the other hand, a compassionate and selfless person might be reborn into a life with less suffering or more opportunities to help others. This raises an intriguing question. Are we unconsciously repeating past lessons, or is there a greater plan guiding our journey? Some traditions suggest that souls are not merely pushed along by karma, but have a say in their next life. The idea of choosing one's incarnation implies that before reincarnating, a soul may select the challenges it will face to foster growth. Those who endure extraordinary hardships might not be victims of random misfortune, but rather souls fulfilling a necessary spiritual journey. It's like an athlete who doesn't take the easy route, but instead pushes themselves into more difficult competitions to grow stronger. If this is true, then our struggles in life aren't just arbitrary. They're opportunities for transformation. But is there any evidence for such claims? Carl Sagan, the famous astrophysicist, dismissed reincarnation as lacking scientific proof. Stephen Hawking found no trace of the soul existing beyond the human brain. Yet, this hasn't stopped researchers like Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker at the University of Virginia from gathering thousands of cases of children recalling past lives, describing previous families, specific locations, and even causes of death. Some of these accounts have been verified with striking accuracy. So what should we believe? Perhaps the answer doesn't lie solely in science or religion, but in personal experience. When faced with adversity, we can see it as a meaningless accident, or we can view it as part of a journey we may have chosen. Maybe the truth isn't black and white. Perhaps karma binds us, but our choices define the road ahead. Quantum physics and spirituality might seem like two entirely different realms. One grounded in mathematics and experimentation, the other in belief and personal experience. Yet, the deeper we explore the nature of consciousness, the more these two fields seem to intersect. If quantum mechanics has taught us anything, it's that reality is far more complex and mysterious than classical science ever imagined. So, could consciousness exist beyond the physical body? Could the concept of karma have a foundation in quantum mechanics? Roger Penrose, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, and Stuart Hameroff, an anesthesiologist, propose a radical idea. Consciousness isn't just a byproduct of neural activity, but a quantum phenomenon occurring at a subatomic level, within the microtubules of neurons. Their orchestrated objective reduction, Orch-OR theory suggests that consciousness emerges from quantum processes inside the brain and, crucially, may persist beyond death. If true, this challenges the long-held assumption that consciousness is purely material. Instead, it would imply that our thoughts, experiences, and even our very sense of self are part of a broader quantum field, one that isn't necessarily confined to the body. To support their hypothesis, Penrose and Hameroff examined microtubules, tiny cylindrical structures found inside neurons that are essential for cell division and communication within the brain. They proposed that these microtubules might function as quantum computers, processing information at a subatomic level in ways that classical physics cannot explain. Their research suggests that these structures maintain quantum coherence, meaning they can exist in multiple states simultaneously, much like particles in quantum mechanics. This coherence, according to Orch-OR, collapses at a specific moment, creating discrete instances of conscious awareness. In other words, consciousness is not just generated by the brain. It is orchestrated through quantum activity, possibly connected to a larger universal field. What makes this even more intriguing is the suggestion that, at the moment of death, the quantum information stored in these microtubules is not lost, but instead released into the universe. Hameroff theorizes that this could explain near-death experiences, NDEs, where people report leaving their bodies, encountering vast realms of light, or even reviewing their lives from a detached perspective. If consciousness is truly non-local, existing beyond the brain, then the idea of reincarnation or an afterlife may not be as far-fetched as it seems. If quantum information can persist beyond physical death, could it be reabsorbed into another body, explaining why some individuals retain past life memories? This theory aligns with ancient spiritual teachings that describe consciousness as a non-physical entity. In Hindu philosophy, the Atman, the soul, is said to be independent of the body, capable of existing beyond death. Some Buddhist interpretations suggest that awareness is like a stream flowing through different lifetimes, not bound to any single form. If consciousness is indeed a quantum field, rather than a localized function of the brain, then these spiritual perspectives might not just be metaphors, but descriptions of a reality we have yet to fully understand. Consider near-death experiences, NDEs, where individuals report floating above their bodies, seeing events unfold from a detached perspective, or encountering realms beyond the physical world. While skeptics argue that these experiences are the result of oxygen deprivation or brain chemistry, quantum consciousness theories offer another explanation. The mind might not be confined to the brain at all. If it operates within a quantum framework, It could theoretically exist independently, even after biological death. This raises profound questions. Are we just temporary vessels, or are we tapping into a greater field of awareness that transcends individual existence? If you're feeling a bit overwhelmed by the concepts of quantum physics, don't worry, you're not alone. Take a moment to pause and absorb what we've covered so far, before I dive into the fascinating connection between karma and quantum mechanics. I promise that by the end of this section, you'll discover some mind-blowing insights that will satisfy your curiosity. The connection between quantum physics and spirituality doesn't stop at consciousness. The idea of karma, cause and effect extending beyond a single lifetime, finds an interesting parallel in the principles of quantum mechanics. Classical physics views causality as linear and deterministic. An action leads to a direct and predictable reaction. But in the quantum world, causality is more fluid. A particle can exist in multiple states until observed, and outcomes aren't always predictable, but rather exist within a range of probabilities. This uncertainty and interconnectivity bear a striking resemblance to the way karma is often described, not as an immediate mechanical consequence, but as an accumulation of energetic imprints that shape future experiences. The concept of the Akashic records, often referenced in Hinduism and Theosophy, suggests that all thoughts, actions, and experiences are stored in a universal field of consciousness. Interestingly, some physicists propose the idea of a quantum information field, where all past interactions are preserved, influencing future outcomes. If karma operates as a kind of quantum imprint, then our actions might not just affect our personal lives, but could ripple through a larger field of reality, shaping not only our destiny, but potentially the fabric of existence itself. Skeptics, of course, argue that quantum mechanics is being misinterpreted to fit spiritual ideas. They point out that while quantum effects govern the microscopic world, they don't necessarily translate to macroscopic systems, like the human brain. But here's the thing: consciousness itself is not fully understood. Neuroscience has yet to explain why we have subjective experiences, why we feel, imagine, and self-reflect. If quantum mechanics plays a role in the emergence of consciousness, then the possibility of non-physical aspects of existence, whether that's an afterlife, karma, or a universal consciousness, deserves serious consideration. Perhaps the real takeaway here isn't about proving one side right or wrong, but about recognizing that science and spirituality are not as separate as we once thought. The deeper we explore the quantum world, the more we realize that reality is shaped by observation, probability, and interconnected fields of energy. Maybe consciousness is not merely a fleeting product of biological processes, but part of a greater, more complex reality, one that has been described in spiritual traditions for centuries. The question is, are we ready to expand our understanding beyond the material and embrace the unknown? If everything were determined by karma, would that make humans mere puppets of the universe, bound to an unchangeable fate? Not quite. Eastern philosophies, particularly Buddhism, emphasize that free will is always present, capable of reshaping karma. The Buddha himself taught that through mindfulness and wisdom, one could transform their destiny. Karma isn't a rigid, predetermined script, but more like a dynamic force. Accumulated actions influence future experiences, yet conscious choices can rewrite the trajectory. This idea has an unexpected parallel in quantum physics. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle suggests that at the fundamental level of reality, the mere act of observation alters outcomes. If the universe at its core behaves this way, what does that say about human consciousness? Perhaps fate isn't as fixed as we assume. If the mind is, in some way, entangled with reality, then perception itself might play a role in shaping experience. In a sense, awareness and intention function like an observer effect on life's possibilities. The moment we recognize a pattern, acknowledge a habit, or decide to change a behavior, we influence what happens next. Just as a quantum particle state isn't determined until it is measured, consider the stories of individuals who break out of cycles that seem karmically ingrained. People born into suffering, who, against all odds, rewrite their narratives. Someone raised in an environment of violence may choose peace. A person experiencing deep despair may cultivate gratitude and find purpose. These are not random occurrences, but demonstrations of how free will interacts with karmic conditioning. The past sets the stage, but the present moment offers a choice. The script isn't locked in. It evolves with every conscious decision. Beyond the philosophical and scientific perspectives, personal experience offers another angle on the relationship between destiny and free will. Have you ever encountered someone and felt an inexplicable familiarity, déjà vu, unexplainable intuitions, or instant connections with strangers? Are these just quirks of the brain, or are they echoes of something deeper? Many who have undergone near-death experiences, NDEs, report encountering realms beyond physical reality, where they gain insights into their purpose, past lives, or the interconnectedness of all beings. These experiences often lead people to believe that existence extends beyond a single lifetime, reinforcing the idea that while past choices influence present circumstances, new choices can still reshape the path forward. Skeptics argue that such experiences are merely neurological phenomena, random firings of the brain, evolutionary artifacts designed to help us process information. But even if that's true, why does the mind work this way? Why do so many people, across cultures and centuries, describe the same kinds of profound moments of recognition and transformation? Whether these experiences are memories of past lives or deep-seated patterns of the subconscious, they suggest that something within us transcends linear time. Maybe what we call fate is simply the momentum of past choices, and what we call free will is our ability to break or reinforce that momentum. The real question isn't whether destiny or free will is more powerful. It's about how they interact. Karma may be the river, but consciousness is the boat. The current is strong, shaped by past actions, but the direction isn't entirely out of our hands. Every moment presents an opportunity to shift course, to row harder against the tide, or let it carry us in a different direction. Fate isn't a prison, it's a landscape, and free will is the ability to navigate it. The challenge, then, is not to ask whether we are bound or free, but to realize that we are both at once. Do souls choose their families and challenges before they are born? In many spiritual traditions, there is a belief that before reincarnation, souls undergo a pre-birth planning phase. With the guidance of spiritual mentors, they supposedly select the relationships and trials they will encounter in their next life. Parents, romantic partners, and even adversaries may not be random encounters, but prearranged soul contracts designed for mutual growth and learning. This idea isn't just a comforting notion. It is supported by numerous accounts of children recalling past lives with uncanny accuracy. One of the most famous cases is that of James Leininger, an American child who, from a young age, described vivid memories of being a World War II pilot. Named James Houston, he recognized places he had never visited, named long-deceased crew members, and even identified his past life sister, who later confirmed many of his statements. If such detailed past life memories hold any truth, could it mean that our closest relationships in this life have deeper roots? Perhaps those we love, and even those we struggle with, are part of a grander plan. This perspective shifts how we see our relationships. If every important connection is, in some way, a continuation of a previous bond, then conflicts might not just be random frustrations, but opportunities for resolution. The difficult boss, the demanding parent, the partner who challenges us. What if these are not coincidences, but necessary experiences for growth? In this view, the people who test us the most might actually be playing a crucial role in our development. This doesn't mean we should tolerate toxic relationships, but it suggests that hardships might serve a purpose beyond what we initially perceive. Beyond individual karma, there's also the concept of group karma. Some burdens don't belong to just one person, but are shared by entire families, communities, or even nations. Historical traumas, wars, and global crises might not be mere accidents of history, but manifestations of unresolved collective karma. Take World War II, for example. Millions of people were drawn into a catastrophic event that reshaped societies and ideologies. Could such large-scale suffering be part of a karmic process, a necessary transformation for humanity's evolution? Consider the global pandemic, an event that forced the entire world into reflection. It highlighted systemic flaws, reshaped economies, and tested human resilience on an unprecedented scale. From a karmic perspective, was this a form of purification, a wake-up call to realign values and reconsider our collective path? So, what lessons have we learned? And more importantly, have we changed as a result, or are we doomed to repeat similar patterns? There's also the question of whether individuals carry the karma of their ancestors. Some spiritual traditions suggest that lineage plays a role in the challenges one faces. Generational trauma is not just a psychological concept. It might have a karmic dimension as well. People born into families with cycles of poverty, addiction, or conflict may not just be victims of circumstance, but souls choosing to break patterns that have existed for generations. Understanding karma in this way empowers us. It means we are not just suffering random misfortunes, but may be part of a greater mission to heal and evolve. Many public figures have spoken about a sense of destiny in their lives, as though they were meant to play a certain role. Take Oprah Winfrey. Born into poverty and hardship, she transformed her life and became a global force for change. She has often spoken about feeling guided by a purpose larger than herself, a sense that she was put on this earth for a reason. Could this be an example of a soul contract in action? Perhaps her struggles were not just obstacles, but essential lessons leading her to fulfill a larger mission. If soul contracts and karmic connections exist, what does that mean for how we live our lives? Should we accept every hardship as part of some divine plan, or do we still have the power to alter our paths? If our relationships are predetermined to some extent, does that mean love and forgiveness are the keys to transcending negative cycles? And if history is influenced by collective karma, are we actively shaping a better future, or merely repeating the past? Regardless of whether one fully believes in reincarnation or karmic contracts, the idea itself carries an important lesson. Nothing is random. Every person we meet, every challenge we face, and every moment of joy or sorrow contributes to our growth. If we approach life with this mindset, perhaps we begin to see our struggles not as punishments, but as opportunities. Maybe our greatest enemies are also our greatest teachers, and maybe, just maybe, the life we are living is one we chose for a reason. What happens after death? Is it truly the end, or just another transition? Across different spiritual traditions and modern research, a fascinating idea emerges that death is not a final curtain, but rather a passage into another phase of existence. Whether through religious teachings, near-death experiences, or scientific explorations into consciousness, the notion of an interlife, a space between incarnations, suggests that the soul undergoes a process of reflection, healing, and preparation before choosing its next journey. Dr. Michael Newton, a hypnotherapist known for his work on past life regression, compiled thousands of case studies where individuals described a similar experience after death. In his book Journey of Souls, he details accounts of people recalling a luminous realm where they meet spiritual guides, reunite with deceased loved ones, and review their past life with a sense of detachment and learning. The idea that souls can analyze their experiences, recognize patterns, and even select their next incarnation adds depth to the concept of karma, not as punishment or reward, but as a continuous process of evolution. Stories of near-death experiences, NDEs, often align with these descriptions. Take the case of Eben Alexander, a neurosurgeon who, despite being a skeptic, had an extraordinary NDE during a coma induced by bacterial meningitis. He described entering a vast, brilliantly lit realm, where he felt an overwhelming sense of love and understanding. He recounted being guided by an angelic presence and experiencing a level of consciousness beyond human comprehension. When he recovered, he found himself completely transformed, no longer dismissing the possibility of an afterlife. Cases like his challenged the materialist view that consciousness is merely a byproduct of the brain, suggesting instead that it may continue beyond physical death. But if the soul does persist after death, does it always reincarnate? Some spiritual traditions propose that not all souls return to the physical world. In Buddhism, highly enlightened beings, arahants or bodhisattvas, can choose whether to reincarnate or enter nirvana, a state beyond suffering and existence. The Dalai Lama, believed to be the reincarnation of previous spiritual masters, is a well-documented example of conscious rebirth. The process of identifying each new Dalai Lama involves examining young children who demonstrate inexplicable knowledge of past lives, reinforcing the idea that some beings reincarnate with full awareness of their spiritual mission. Hinduism presents a similar view, with the concept of moksha, the liberation from the cycle of birth and rebirth. A soul that has reached enlightenment no longer needs to return, but instead merges with the universal consciousness. Much like a drop of water rejoining the ocean, this resonates with theories in quantum physics and consciousness studies, which suggest that information and energy cannot be destroyed, but merely transform. Some scientists speculate that consciousness might exist within a quantum information field, separate from the physical body. If this is the case, could an enlightened soul simply dissolve into this larger field, no longer needing individual existence? The question then arises, if not all souls reincarnate, what determines who returns? Many spiritual traditions suggest that those who still have lessons to learn, attachments to resolve, or desires unfulfilled, will continue the cycle of rebirth. But this also raises a more personal and profound question. Are we living in a way that leads to growth? Or are we repeating the same mistakes, lifetime after lifetime? If life is an opportunity for the soul to evolve, are we taking full advantage of it? Regardless of belief, one undeniable truth emerges. Life is fleeting, whether or not there is another existence beyond this one. The time we have now is limited. If we lived as if every moment mattered, as if every action shaped not just this life, but whatever comes next, how different would our choices be? Would we hold on to grudges, chase after material success at the cost of inner peace, or ignore the deeper calling to become something more? Perhaps the greatest lesson from all these perspectives is not to fear death, but to live with purpose. If we do return, let it be with wisdom gained. And if this is our last incarnation, let it be one that leaves a meaningful imprint on the world we leave behind. Throughout history, there have been individuals whose presence reshaped human consciousness. These enlightened beings, Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, Lao Tzu, are said to have transcended the ordinary cycle of life and death, yet they chose to return, not for themselves, but for the sake of humanity. The idea that certain highly evolved souls deliberately reincarnate to uplift others is a recurring theme across spiritual traditions. If enlightenment is freedom from suffering, why would anyone who has attained it come back? The answer lies in a deep sense of compassion, a commitment to guide others toward the same awakening. The Buddha, after reaching enlightenment, could have withdrawn into peaceful solitude, free from the burdens of the world. Yet he chose to stay, traveling across India for decades to teach the path to liberation. His famous words, "I teach suffering and the end of suffering," reveal his purpose, not to elevate himself, but to show humanity a way out of ignorance and pain. Similarly, Jesus spoke of love, forgiveness, and the kingdom of God, not as an external paradise, but as something within. When he said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you," he was pointing to the same realization that many mystics and sages have since echoed. The true path is inward. What's striking is that these figures often did not start out fully aware of their mission. Many spiritual traditions suggest that even enlightened souls experience forgetfulness upon reincarnation, only to awaken gradually. Krishna, though divine in Hindu belief, spent his early years as a mischievous child before fully embracing his role. Lao Tzu, the great Taoist sage, withdrew from the world, but left behind his teachings at the request of a gatekeeper, giving humanity the Tao Te Ching, a work that continues to inspire seekers. Thousands of years later, this idea of awakening isn't reserved for saints and sages. While not everyone is destined to become a world teacher, the principle remains the same. Each individual has a role to play in the collective evolution of humanity. Enlightenment isn't about performing miracles or renouncing the world. It's about expanding awareness and living with intention. Every act of kindness, every conscious choice, every moment of stillness contributes to this journey. The simplest and most profound way to evolve the soul is through mindfulness, awareness of thoughts, emotions, and actions. Most people go through life on autopilot, reacting rather than responding, consumed by habits and distractions. But when you pause, observe, and choose consciously, you begin to shift. Meditation is one of the most direct paths to this awareness. It's not about emptying the mind, but learning to see it clearly. The more one practices stillness, the more one realizes that identity, fears, and desires are transient. Beneath all of it lies something deeper, a presence that is not bound by personal history or social conditioning. Compassion is another key practice. Enlightened beings are not just wise, they are profoundly loving. The Dalai Lama, a modern example of a soul who seems to have chosen reincarnation for the sake of others, often says, "If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion." This isn't just philosophy, it's psychology. Studies show that acts of kindness and empathy literally rewire the brain, creating more happiness and resilience. Self-inquiry, a practice advocated by sages like Ramana Maharshi, involves questioning the very nature of the self. Instead of getting caught up in personal narratives, one asks, "Who am I?" Not as an intellectual exercise, but as a deep introspection. The more one searches, the more the illusion of separateness dissolves, revealing a connection to something greater. If the idea of reincarnation and soul evolution holds any truth, then life is more than just survival and success. Every difficulty is an opportunity to grow, every relationship a lesson, every moment a chance to become more conscious. And if souls do return to help humanity, then the best way to honor them is not just to admire their teachings, but to embody them. The real question is not whether enlightenment exists, or whether souls return, but what each person is doing with the time they have. Are we moving toward greater awareness, or are we repeating old patterns? Are we contributing to the world's healing, or are we adding to its suffering? The journey of humanity isn't carried by a few great figures alone. It's shaped by the collective choices of all who seek truth. Life is not a random series of events. It is part of a greater journey of learning and evolution, whether viewed through the lens of spirituality or emerging discoveries in quantum physics. The evidence suggests that consciousness is far more than just a byproduct of the brain. The way we live, the choices we make, and the energy we put into the world all contribute to shaping not just our own path, but the collective experience of humanity. Science and spirituality, often seen as opposites, are beginning to converge. Quantum mechanics is challenging traditional views of reality, hinting at the possibility that consciousness may exist beyond the physical. Concepts once dismissed as mystical, such as reincarnation, karma, and interconnectedness, are now being explored in ways that bridge the gap between empirical research and ancient wisdom. If our consciousness continues beyond this life, then every action carries weight, influencing the trajectory of the soul's evolution. Yet, despite the larger framework of karma and destiny, free will remains. Nothing is set in stone. Every moment presents an opportunity to break old patterns, create new possibilities, and align with a higher purpose. The key is awareness, living consciously, cultivating love, and taking responsibility for our thoughts and actions. Those who seek true growth are not waiting for enlightenment to come from outside. They are shaping their own transformation with every decision they make. If this resonates with you, don't let this moment pass. Be part of a conscious awakening. Like this, subscribe, and join a community that seeks truth, meaning, and deeper understanding. The journey doesn't end here. It's just beginning.